Good day, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to our technical summary video on mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations in the workplace, dealing with compensation for injuries or death. I am Letty Janse van Vuren. The summary video deals with a notice that was issued, a notice on compensation, general notice that was gazetted on the 22nd of October. So just so that you know, that's exactly what we are dealing with today. Looking at the contents, we're going to start off, as always, with why this is important to us. Wherever you see COIDA, obviously we know what it stands for. We're going to look at a quick overview, and then we'll have some requirements that must be fulfilled. That's what the notice is all about, are the new requirements. In terms of the abbreviation, COIDA stands for the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. OHS, Occupational Health and Safety, OHSA, Occupational Health and Safety Act, and then NOCLAR, non-compliance with laws and regulations. As part of the introduction, why is this relevant to auditors, independent reviewers, and accountants? Well, how does this affect us? Remember that both COIDA and the OHSA are pieces of legislation that not only we, but the clients, our clients, have to comply with. And we then have to assess compliance with that. If they don't comply with the relevant laws and regulations, you have certain reporting obligations in terms of NOCLAR. That's in terms of our code of conduct. So if in your capacity as a compiler, it might only mean that you report it onto management. As an auditor, it might even mean that it could be so severe that it affects you in terms of qualifying your audit opinion, or even possibly reporting a reportable irregularity. In your capacity as an auditor, you would report the RI to IRBA. In your capacity as an independent reviewer, you would report that RI to SIPC. So that's very important. Remember, as an employer, you are expected to act in accordance with COIDA and all the latest consolidated OHS directives. There have been 4 during the year, but the latest one was in May, and that's the one that we've got to worry about. There are specific references in there to the policies regarding mandatory vaccinations. So that's what you need to worry about. As an employer, you're also expected to assist your employees to claim from the compensation fund. And you might even then also assist your client with a COIDA claim. So you can see that there's a lot of practical reasons why you need to worry about this. Why your clients need to worry about this is because they've got a duty to adhere to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. They have to act in accordance with the latest consolidated OHS directive, specifically with regards to the mandatory vaccinations. And then, of course, they are also expected to assist their employees to claim from the compensation fund. Looking at the overview, the Compensation Fund Commissioner published this notice, and basically in a nutshell, this is my summary. It says that in terms of COIDA, employees who suffer side effects including injuries, illness or death as a result of receiving a COVID-19 vaccine may now claim compensation from the compensation fund. So remember now that the compensation fund will cover employees for injuries, illness or death as a result of receiving the vaccine only where they are required by the employer to receive a vaccination. So only when we talk about mandatory vaccinations, either because it's an inherent requirement of employment or where vaccination is required based on the overall OHS risk assessment conducted by the employer. An inherent requirement of employment would be, for instance, for health workers. That has to be one of the conditions of employment, is that they remain up to date with all their vaccinations, and therefore the hospitals would have adopted mandatory vaccination policies. All right. For other corporate clients, they would have had to do a proper OHS risk assessment as per the OHS directive, and it will happen in accordance with that then. Right, so the claims will be basically adjudicated and compensation determined and paid in terms of the Act and the guidelines of the fund. There is a link into the actual document for you, the actual gazetted notice. Very important, let's have a look at the requirements here. The vaccination has to be regarded as an inherent requirement of the job. This is what the notice has reiterated. Remember, we know that we can claim. We know the process for claiming is the same. We know that the documents that you must submit is the same. The guidelines are the same. But these are new requirements specifically related to mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations. If these requirements are not fulfilled, then the compensation fund will not honor that claim. So it must be an inherent job requirement, okay, as it is determined by the risk assessment, and the employee must have been vaccinated with a SAPRA approved COVID-19 vaccine. Right, so I think at the moment it's the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer ones. Thirdly, evidence must be provided that the employer has completed his risk assessment and vaccination plan. It's set out in paragraph 3 of the Consolidated Directions on OHS measures in certain workplaces. That's the main document there. It was dated in May. That was the fourth one that was issued since we started the COVID lockdown. So it's very important. It has to happen in terms of that OHS Consolidated Direction. And then fourthly, the chronological sequence between the inoculation time and the development of symptoms and the clinical signs must be provided. So they can't have symptoms first and then go for the vaccine and then try and claim compensation for that. They must first of all have the vaccination and then after that develop symptoms. All right, and then whatever clinical signs it is, it must be provided there. In terms of the employee that must have presented symptoms that are generally recognized, so they can't just say, "Oh, I don't know, my right earlobe started paining profusely." If it's not one of the known and clinical signs that are generally recognized as COVID-19 side effects, it will not be honored by the compensation fund. And then lastly, additional tests may be required to assess the presence of any abnormalities of any organs that are affected. A lot of times it can cause kidney damage or liver damage, and then additional blood tests may be required if they are claiming for damages to kidneys and to any organs like that. Right, so just so that you know, these requirements are what must be adhered to when you do claim from the compensation fund for side effects suffered as a result of mandatory vaccines. So short and sweet, the employer has major responsibilities in terms of occupational health and safety. The compensation fund will only cover employees where mandatory vaccination, so number one, mandatory vaccination, is evident as per their risk assessment or it is an inherent requirement of employment. Remember that as auditors and independent reviewers and normal professional accountants, we have to assess our no-CLAR, right? Our no-CLAR responsibilities, and specifically for auditors and independent reviewers who have to assess compliance with relevant laws and regulations in terms of ISA 250 and ISRE 2400, that needs to happen. All right, no-CLAR, who do you report to? Lastly, but probably the most important, an in-depth knowledge is necessary, not only for your employees in your offices, and your client and your client's employees, but for you in your own capacity as an employer and as a professional accountant as well. You need to know the contents of this consolidated OHS directive, and you also need to know how to apply it. So just off the top of my head, for instance, in the latest consolidated OHS directive, there's an Annexure C that deals with everything related to mandatory vaccinations. What must you now do? It's like a little summary of what is required of you. All right. So very important, related webinars. There's a webinar that I did in July that was a 2-hour webinar specifically just on the contents of that consolidated directive. If you feel that you still need more detail, we've got our Knowledge is Power little page here with all the products that are available for you that will help you and provide you with valuable CPD. So that's it from me, from Letty Janse van Vuren. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I trust you enjoy the technical summary video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.